Brad, how are you? Thank you very much for joining us again at Golf Industry Asia. Thank you for your time to have a quick chat.
No worries, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I thought, obviously, with the time of the year now coming to summer, big topic, especially in the Asia region, is obviously how the weather changes. We have typhoons, we have extreme rain, flooding, things like that. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to pick your brains a little bit about the topic and how that differs.
Yeah, sounds good.
So obviously, having worked in the industry in Asia, you're always going to have washouts, things like that, and how it affects the course. But I'm no expert in agronomy, so how does really the wet season impact turf health and performance and the agronomy side?
Well, a few different ways. So yeah, like you said, washout. So it's a monsoonal weather pattern in most of Southeast Asia, where you have a defined dry season and defined wet season. Some parts of Southeast Asia it'll rain most of the year, but then you'll still have a heavier period of rain. So yeah, if your bunker drainage isn't so great, or the bunker design has big sand faces, then you're going to get a lot more washouts, which is going to require a larger labor commitment to repair all those washouts, and maybe less time spent on like setting up the course or preparing it to a higher standard. You just be focusing more on bunker repair. So that's one big change. The other way is turf health and performance. So it's usually, depending on what grass type you have on the greens, it's usually the most difficult time for turf managers to manage turf in Southeast Asia. So like turf requirements, the basic requirements, turf needs light, it needs heat, water and nutrients. So usually most of those are not limiting. Like usually we have enough temperature, heat to grow grass, especially in the wet season, we have enough moisture. We tend to control nutrients pretty well, but we can assume that we're supplying enough nutrients for turf health on a regular basis. The biggest limiting factor in the wet season is sunlight or light quality. So the problems with that is, and the problems it generates, if you've ever seen kind of grass or turf growing under a tree, like in a deep shaded area, it tends to it looks like it's trying to reach up, like it's quite leggy, we call it, or like stringy, like it's reaching, and then the density isn't very good. It's usually very soft leaf blade. And that's the grass basically trying to reach for more sunlight. It's trying to find more sunlight. And it may not be as obvious on a putting green because the turf height, it's mown so short, but it's trying to do the same thing. So you'll find you might get more scalping, which is where the mower will like cut off too much grass, and there'll be like an orange or brown spot where there's no leaf left. You'll find that you'll start to lose a little bit of density. So it'll be a little bit thin. And then the plant will generally just be weaker. It won't be as resilient to wear or other stresses because it's not getting as much energy from the sun. It's not getting enough sunlight to photosynthesize. So each of the main grass types that you get in Southeast Asia, the main warm season grass types, Bermuda, Zoysia, Paspalum, they all have different light requirements or different minimum requirements. So they're all going to be affected in different ways with the absence of sunlight from all the cloudy weather and rain. So Bermuda grass has the highest requirement for sunlight. It needs like a minimum of 8 hours of intense or good quality sunlight per day. Or if you talk about daily light integral, it's like 50 is the number to be above. And I can share some website where people can look up what the daily light integral is average to their location. So yeah, Bermuda really struggles with low light conditions. The second one is paspalum. It doesn't need as much light as Bermuda, but it needs more than zoysia. Zoysia has the lowest light requirement. So zoysia grasses do better in low light conditions. Paspalum is in the middle, and then Bermuda has the highest light requirement. So
what would stop clubs just using obviously the grass that requires the least amount of light? Surely there's going to be benefits and pros and cons to both.
Yes. So each choice has trade-offs. So usually Bermuda is regarded as having the highest quality putting surface, like the putting surface quality. So ball speed and smoothness and just general feel. Whereas paspalum has quite good aesthetics, like it's really a nice green color. Its positives are it can handle really poor quality water, irrigation water. Obviously requires less sunlight. Zoysia requires quite few inputs. It needs more water than Bermuda. It doesn't need as much light. It doesn't need as much fertilizer, insecticides, or fungicides. But it's generally takes a little bit more work, like on the surface preparation, to get better ball roll and green speeds, things like that. It can be a little bit bumpy, just requires a bit more work. That's in general. Paspalum negatives would be it's generally slow green speed and is more susceptible year round to a lot of diseases and insect pressure, and doesn't have there's not many things you can do about weeds. So there's a lot of hand weeding you need to do. Negatives with Bermuda, besides the, I talked about the positives of surface, the surface performance. The negatives are just that period in the wet season. You're going to have to apply a lot of fungicides. You're going to have to really maximize and focus on turf health. So reducing stresses, less rolling, raising mowing heights, lots of different things just to get it to survive through the wet season. But then when you get it to the dry season, it's generally really nice surface. So.
Okay. What would you go through in terms of a decision process to try and decide what grasses would be best for your current climate wherever you are in the world? Would that be from a cost perspective of maybe the additional care of fertilizer, water, irrigation? Would it be more from the manpower in terms of having to care for it physically a bit more? What would be your sort of your decision makers?
I think a few things. So first one I would look at on the list is irrigation water quality. So if you just have really, really poor water, like really salty, or the pH is crazy, it's just the only thing you'd be able to grow is paspalum, and that's all you can do unless you get like a reverse osmosis water treatment system, and then you can adjust the water quality to suit maybe one of the other types of grasses. So that's the first thing I would look at. If the water quality is bad and you don't have the resources for reverse osmosis, then paspalum is your choice. Otherwise, I'd look at what are the goals or the vision for the club and its members or customers. So are you aiming to be like really high performing a club, like where you want to have tournaments, or your expectations from guests are really high, like you have a lot of low handicappers, or
is it purely traffic and more of the commercial tourist golf where it's just trying to playability year round?
That for sure. Or is your membership like quite elderly and they don't need like 10 plus green speeds? They're just happy to go out with an average green speed as long as the greens are in good condition. So I'd look at that as another step. And then what kind of agronomy team do you have in place? Like what's their expertise and their experience? So if you're going to go for a Bermuda grass, or you're looking towards a Bermuda grass, that's going to trend towards a more high performance side and generally needs a bit more experience and skill trying to manage it through the wet season. But you're going to have a more high performing surface if you're successful. And then otherwise, zoysia on the other side is probably a lot easier to maintain. You're not going to have anywhere near as many issues turf health wise through the year. But it's going to generally, on average, it's not going to perform as well as the Bermuda grass in terms of green speed and surface performance unless you put in that extra work to get it there. So yeah, I would look at those. They're all similar prices, I think, to buy. In terms of maintenance costs, Bermuda and Paspalum are going to trend towards the higher maintenance costs in terms of inputs, whereas zoysia will be the lower end of inputs as well. So if you're not looking at spending, if you don't want to have like a higher budget or you want a leaner budget, then zoysia is probably another option. Yeah.
Nice. And in terms of going back to sort of the wet season and more health-wise, as a golfer, you go and play courses, and you see either bare patches on the greens. You obviously see disease rings, things like that. What effect does the wet season have on actual diseases and the health of the turf?
So like with Bermuda and that low or that higher light requirement, but the low light input during the wet season, it just weakens it so much. And then you have the all this extra moisture. So most diseases, they're going to spread through surplus water in the root system or on the surface. So if you have like water flooding on the surface, or you have just a high moisture content in the soil, then those disease pathogens, those spores, are just going to spread very easily through there. And because the grass is already in such a weakened state from not getting enough energy from sunlight, then it's just going to come straight in and attack it. And if you're still getting like lots and lots of rounds of golf on top of that, or you're trying to still push for green speed on top of that surface, like you're adding more and more stress onto that grass, then it's going to be a higher likelihood of disease infection and severity of infection. It's just going to spread and multiply everywhere. And there's a number of diseases, predominantly Pythium and Bermuda decline diseases, which spread very rapidly, like within overnight or the next few days would take out large areas of greens. So yeah, it's kind of scary. And that's like Bermuda has some scary kind of diseases in the wet season. Paspalum does as well. It gets more Pythium, I would say, if you're not managing it or you're not careful. Zoysia less so, because it doesn't get that weak in the wet season. But to prevent all of that, preparation before the wet season is key. So you really want to be mindful of soil organic matter buildup. So if you have a higher level of surface organic matter, then it's going to hold more moisture, kind of like a sponge in the soil. And it also creates like a layer or a buffer for fungicides. So it makes your fungicides less effective when you apply them, and creates kind of an ideal environment for disease pathogens to multiply and spread. So really diluting that organic matter as much as you can to help promote infiltration of excess moisture down to the drainage layer is key. Before
the wet season, and obviously with the rain, how does that affect the turf health in terms of diseases with the different grasses?
So Bermuda gets affected quite heavily because of its the highest requirement for light, and then it gets the lowest input of light through the wet season. So with the excess moisture you get from the wet season in the soil, and that's generally how a lot of the disease pathogens spread, is excess water in the soil, maybe some flooding or excess water on the surface, and then the spores of those diseases will spread through that excess water. So there's certain diseases like Pythium and Bermuda decline, which spread very rapidly, like overnight or within a couple of days. You can lose large patches of a green. And if you're not careful and you're trying to still push for turf performance or green performance during that time, so you're rolling, you're verticutting, or you're just having you've got still lots of golfer traffic on there, so there's all these extra stresses right on top of the grass.
Yeah.
Then that's just going to make it the turf even more susceptible to disease infection, and you're going to get a lot of damage. So paspalum also does get affected, mostly by Pythium and brown patch, things like that. So yeah, Pythium, obviously, like with Bermuda, spreads very rapidly through excess moisture. Zoysia gets less issues because it's generally stays a bit stronger than the other grasses through the wet season, but you still need to be mindful. So generally, to try and prevent all of that damage, prevention before the wet season is key. So soil organic matter management. Okay. So you really need to make sure that there isn't an excess of soil organic matter in the soil. So basically that's programs like aeration, top dressing, those kind of things that dilute soil organic matter. Yeah. So there's different tools you can use. The best one I found is a soil organic matter test created through Brookside Labs, which we work with, and that generally breaks down organic matter in layers, so 2, 4, 6 centimeter layers, and then we can target those layers very easily and adopt our maintenance strategies according to how that progresses over time. Yeah. So the problem with excess organic matter in the soil is that it kind of acts like a sponge. It just holds this excess moisture at the surface, and then it also creates like a buffer. Okay. Where it's going to mean that any fungicides or chemicals like insecticides you apply, they're not going to be as effective at reaching the pathogens, or it kind of neutralizes them in a way. So you really want to minimize that organic matter as much as possible, and that way in the wet season, with that organic matter properly diluted, it's going to maximize your infiltration rate of excess moisture down to the drainage layer, so you don't have that surplus in the soil, which promotes and spreads disease.
In terms of disease, what would be the long-term knock-on effects of, obviously, the negative side of getting disease, in terms of a cost to a club, whether it's labor, whether it's supplies, whether it's, maybe obviously effect would be revenue, in terms of if it's obviously pay to play? What would be the long-term effects from the agronomy side?
Yeah, well, from the club revenue, like you said, if you get kind of lots of damage all over multiple greens, then you may have to give discounts on green fees, or which definitely hurts your revenue. From the agronomy side, it could be you'll need to re-turf a lot of areas, and then if you get huge infestations, like huge populations of disease, and you don't really knock it out completely 100%, like you'll never really kill them 100%. There's always some kind of spores or the pathogens left over in the soil. My concerns would be that then once conditions are no longer favorable for disease development, you're going to get a lot of dormant spores kind of sitting there, kind of overwintering, it's called, in the soil. Yeah. Just waiting for the next kind of period where conditions are favorable to spread again. So that's definitely the biggest concern, and trying to limit that kind of disease infection as much as possible. So yeah, preparation wise, making sure you have a really good preventative fungicide plan in place that's covers all the main diseases. That and making sure you have a turf nursery. Worst case scenario that you do get some death out on your greens, you can patch it up pretty quickly with turf from your nursery. Also, look at doing things proactively, like raising the mowing heights before coming into like the main part of the wet season. So raising mowing heights takes a lot of stress off the plant. It also increases the amount of leaf surface area, so you can maximize the available sunlight that is there, giving the plant more energy. And then just like planning less cultural practices. So by cultural practices, I mean like verticutting, grooming, rolling, anything that puts stress on the turf. So yeah, minimizing those kind of things is going to help. Definitely minimize disease risk.
What kind of simple things could you do to try and maximize sunlight and probably try and stop as much standing water and moisture as possible?
I think raising mowing height is the biggest one.
Okay.
Maximizing sunlight, regular aeration through the wet season. So if your soil profile is, the drainage isn't that great, hopefully you have access to some kind of aeration equipment or a deep aeration equipment, or maybe you can rent one. Doing that regularly through the wet season will just help move water down through the profile. So that, especially if you haven't removed enough organic matter previously, or maybe the sand or soil mixture you have in your greens is not ideal for drainage. So regular aeration is good, regular top dressing. Another one is, well, we talked about the fungicide plan. That's going to help prevent a lot of the diseases that come in. Wetting agents, so a good quality penetrant wetting agent. So applying those regularly is just going to, again, help move water down through the soil, not hold it in the profile. I think they're the biggest ones that are going to help. Just really using like soil moisture meters or moisture probes, and trying to keep soil moisture to a minimum. You're not kind of guessing irrigation then. You don't, because a lot of the time in the wet season, even if it doesn't rain, you may think you need to water because it doesn't rain, but because there's lots of cloud cover, the ET or the evapotranspiration is very low. So you can get away with not watering because the greens aren't wilting. So yeah, using a soil moisture probe is great. Just keep stress.
You did a talk obviously over in India quite recently about a similar subject. Is there anything else that you think our readers or listeners would benefit from knowing?
Yeah, well, the biggest things is stress management. Okay. So just minimizing stress, and that's traffic management mostly. So how you manage your whole locations, keeping them away from any stressed areas. And I think communication is really, really important. So communication between the turf management team and the management team. So, and then the management team, whether that's GM or committee, like GM communicating the committee or to owners or to other stakeholders like members, is very important. Like, you don't want your guests or your owners or committee to be surprised at what happens, or they go out on the course one time and like, why is half the green dead? So I think preparing them for the possibilities of what the wet season brings, that's going to be possibly lower green, like slower green speeds, because you need to shift from pushing performance to then pushing more turf health and less on the performance side. So yeah, communicating there's going to be a little bit of a shift. We'll still try and bring high green speeds and good performance when conditions are good. Yeah. But then if we're getting weeks of rain or low sunlight, then we're going to have to shift more on towards the turf health side. and then any kind of possibilities like educating them on disease and things like that. But then on what programs you have in place.
Like you said, communication as well. It's almost setting the expectations of the golfers as well, almost getting ahead of it. You know, you can go and play a game of golf and the greens might not be perfect, but if you know that going into them, your expectations are set, you know, actually realistically, and you can still go out there and enjoy your game. Whereas you can easily rock up to a golf course, say, oh, I forgot, oh, the green's this or the greens are that. And it almost brings a negative where it's just almost setting that expectation from the get-go.
Yeah. And most of the time, like you say, oh, the greens aren't so, like they might be a little bit less than what they normally are today. And then they go out and play and they're like, oh, actually, they were good. So they had their expectations set low, but then they got out and they were pleasantly surprised. Whether it's better than the other way around, where they go out expecting good conditions and then it's really bad. So,
and it's gaining the buy-in from, like you said, the stakeholders. If it's a membership or a membership committee, you know, they're buying into it that, you know, it's going to produce good turf in the high season and for the competitions they play and stuff like that. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and then if you consistently have issues with disease and things in the wet season because of your grass selection, and then the members or the owners, they can't, you know, they don't want to have to deal with it anymore. Like they would rather favor consistent conditions year round rather than like high performance some of the year, then yeah, maybe the conversation is then had about changing grass as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time, Brad. I always feel like every time we have a chat, I learn something new.
That's good. That's a great outcome then. I'm happy.